We are so early in this initial exploration phase of what Satoshi unleashed. I like capitalism. I like the fact that people can experiment and other people can actually risk their money and see if this helps. Bitcoin does not allow that. It cannot be that the whole world economy is on Bitcoin and we're waiting for 200 devs to sort of argue and decide on stuff. If you say there can be no more innovation at all in the area of cryptocurrency on anything, no, smart contracts are doomed to fail from the start. The undeniable reality is that Bitcoin's value today is...
Quick reminder, nothing said on Supply Shock is a recommendation to buy or sell any investment or product. This podcast is for informational purposes only, and the views expressed by anyone on the show are solely their opinions, not financial advice or necessarily the views of Blockworks. Our hosts, guests, and the Blockworks team may hold positions the company sponsor projects discussed. Hey everybody, Pete Rizzo, the Bitcoin historian on X. We've got a great episode of Supply Shock for you today, bringing on someone who's no stranger to the Bitcoin history, a computer scientist whose contributions go all the way back to the earliest days of Bitcoin, back to 2013, when Bitcoin price was under $100. He was out there giving conference speeches on the technological advances that were possible with Bitcoin. I'm talking about the co-founder and CEO of StarkWare, Eli Ben-Sasson. Eli, welcome to the program. Happy to have you.
Thank you, Rizzo. Really excited to be here. Love your podcast.
Thanks. And wanted to start all the way back in 2013. Obviously, you're working on kind of the future of Bitcoin today and pioneering a lot of things that potentially could unlock big advances in how we use Bitcoin. But we spent a lot of time on this podcast talking about how Bitcoin has evolved as a technology, as a culture, as a design space. Back in 2013, you were working on theoretical cryptography. You were looking at applying that to Bitcoin. And back then there was a lot of excitement and a lot of optimism that technology might come to Bitcoin quickly. Is that correct?
Yeah, I guess I was a bit naive. A bunch of others were, I think, naive. Maybe Greg Maxwell and Mike Hearn and others who were active at the time. We were all very enthusiastic that the kind of ZK stars that I was describing back in 2013 are going to be by now on Bitcoin. And I think that if Satoshi would have still been communicating, we would have had them, but we're not there yet.
Well, let's talk about that early development culture because it's changed a lot. There's a lot of kind of angst in the developer community these days about the direction, lack of direction. People have a lot of thoughts and feelings on that. But you mentioned a few names there and people you worked with, Greg Maxwell, maybe Zuko Wilcox O'Hearn, ultimately founded the Zcash project that you worked on as well. But early on, I think there was a sense that, Bitcoin was going to be able to accommodate kind of all these ideas that were happening in the theoretical cryptography space. And then it seemed like over time, there was this realization that, well, perhaps experiments are best happening elsewhere. There's a lot about Bitcoin as a technology that we don't know about, we don't understand very well. And maybe I want to talk about this kind of early, I wouldn't say division, but there was a period where things like Zero Coin that you worked on, an early privacy technology for Bitcoin that were sort of proposed as Bitcoin improvements. They became alternative cryptocurrencies. Kind of the modern cultures of Bitcoin, is very dismissive of that. But at the time, it was sort of viewed as something where, if people want to work on these theoretical ideas, they should go elsewhere. I was wondering if you just kind of comment on and just talk about what it was like to be kind of parsing these ideas out at that time.
Yeah, you mentioned Zcash. I was a founding scientist of it. It's based on academic work that we did that is titled Zero Cash. I think improving privacy over Bitcoin. And everyone's thought process in the day was that, there's only one thing, and that one thing is Bitcoin. And we would have loved to deploy Zcash on Bitcoin. I would have loved to deploy, Starks on Bitcoin. It's just that with time, in all of these projects and others, folks realize that with all our respect and love for Bitcoin, the politics, whatever dynamics of it, just don't allow the technology to accept these things, and that hasn't changed yet, unfortunately. And I think it is unfortunate. I think Bitcoin, in my view, is more than just money and the protocol. Both are amazing, but it also is something bigger that Satoshi described, right? He wanted, and it's in the second paragraph of the white paper, Satoshi's white, to find a way for any two parties to transact with no trust assumptions, no trusted third parties, and what he wanted. And Bitcoin cannot deliver that today. Its auxiliary protocols are close to that, but Bitcoin does not allow any two parties. I mean, there's not enough scale. It's too cumbersome. It's too costly. You cannot today have any two parties transact with no trust in the third party on Bitcoin. Not with the TPS that you have today and the fees and whatnot. It's impossible. So I think there's more that Bitcoin can deliver.
Yeah, you mentioned there, kind of talking about wanting Bitcoin to have privacy and have these other features. And so, maybe as a general commentary, just as I try to understand your thought process, there's this idea of like what drives Bitcoin's value, right? And I think when I talk to a lot of builders, they'll acknowledge that earlier in Bitcoin's history, was kind of thought that Bitcoin's forward technical progress really was driving its value, right? If I think about the fork wars and kind of the contention around the different Bitcoin fork proposals, it seems more and more as we kind of distance ourselves in time from that, that the prevailing feeling was that these were very necessary upgrades, to ensure the continued development of Bitcoin's price appreciation as an asset, right? Because ultimately Bitcoin is an asset that's sort of its primary use case. Obviously, though, that's a pretty loaded phrase that I just said. But there is this tension between kind of Bitcoin as the technology and Bitcoin as the asset. So I'm just curious for your thoughts on, do you still feel like Bitcoin's forward technological development and its price relationship are as strong as they were back in the day? Do you sort of acknowledge that, Bitcoin as the asset has found product market fit, even though some of these, more exotic technical ideas really haven't found footing?
Well, the reality and the facts are that Bitcoin as an asset, as in some new form of financial asset, like gold or diamonds or works of art or a Rolex or whatever. Um, it already carries immense value, and that thing has been established. I think that's a fact that cannot be denied. But I'm not, I'm not interested in yet another asset. Um, and let me also mention that today, access and true ownership of this asset is something that really only the very rich can do and do, or the
Why do you say that? Why do you say that though? Because I mean, today I can buy Bitcoin from an exchange, withdraw it into a
Oh,
self-custodial wallet.
that's right. From an exchange, right? But I'm saying the reality is that if you look at, let's say, small retail owners, they will not hold and certainly not transact and use Bitcoin self-custodially, like a whale will say, I'll have some operation where I really can trust, that my 24 word passphrase is like well done, and I have redundancy there. Most people today, most retail people, certainly people who come onto it today, um, are not going to be using it as this asset that they, and certainly not as this thing that they will base their economic life on. And when they do so today, more and more they will do this through third parties. So they will go and purchase an ETF. They'll buy stocks of a uh, Bitcoin pubco to give them proxy to it. But to me, the most interesting, and I would say the only interesting thing to me about Bitcoin is Satoshi's innovation and ingeniousness in the way he basically took the social construct of money and based it on just this beautiful new democratic decentralized broad basis for the first time in the history of humanity. And I just think that these principles can and should be applied not just to the asset that is Bitcoin, just as a new form of gold. I think it is really important that they be applied to more and more areas of our economic and social activities. And for that, and I would like that to happen actually on Bitcoin under Bitcoin's purview and principles. but today it's impossible unless we, go through some soft forks.
For the past decade, Ledger has been the global leader in digital asset security, trusted to secure more than 20% of the world's crypto assets. Celebrating 10 years of innovation, Ledger is making digital ownership more secure and accessible with their latest products, Ledger Stacks and Ledger Flex. These wallets feature the world's first secure touchscreens, simplifying your digital transactions while ensuring uncompromising security through Ledger's secure chip and proprietary OS. Plus, with the Ledger Security Key app, you can say goodbye to traditional passwords and step up your digital protection. Ready to protect your assets? Choose the most trusted name in hardware wallets, Ledger, and take control of your digital security today at ledger.com.
As always, investments in blockchain technology involve risk. Terms and conditions may apply. Do your own research. But those barrier to entries aren't really related to cost, right? They're more related to education, right? So if I'm onboarding to somebody today to Bitcoin and I'm saying you could buy an ETF or a Bitcoin treasury company or buy Bitcoin, there's not any added cost really for someone buying Bitcoin and withdrawing into their own wallet, right? But especially with the, mempool where it is today, where current fees are less than 1 sat per VByte right now.
I think that just as the undeniable reality is that Bitcoin's value today is not directly connected to its ongoing technological innovation. I think it's just as undeniable that most of the people, retail people, the new people coming and getting exposure to Bitcoin are not going to hold their self-custodial wallets probably under the current situation ever. They will buy MSTR, they will buy ETFs, they will just not. So I think it's another undeniable fact. The cyberpunks, the very crypto or very, very, very ideological folks, yes, maybe even if they onboard today, they will insist on doing it with, let's say, their own wallet. But I think that's a very, very small fraction. And I cannot foresee global daily usage of Bitcoin in a true self-custodial way like Satoshi wanted without changes to the protocol. I think that's another undeniable reality. And I know that people are, there are a lot of believers, saying, "Oh no, through Lightning this will happen." We've been 7 years or more into Lightning. It's not being globally adopted, and I don't think that's going to do it. Unfortunately, I love Lightning, I love it. I love Bitcoin. I think it's unrealistic to think that people will, drop their very convenient payment mechanisms with really good UX and say we're going to go self-custodial on Bitcoin in the way that maybe you and I might go. That's not going to happen.
Well, okay, I think I understand. So you're saying essentially that, imagining the future state where Bitcoin blocks sort of need to be full in order for there to be security on the chain. You're just saying that the kind of usability conditions under the current environment will force people away from self-custody, even if they're able to use self-custody now and it's fairly cheap.
Yeah, they have forced them. I mean, the people onboarding onto exposure on Bitcoin are not doing it by filling up blocks and getting their own wallets, whatever, Trezors and ledgers, and doing that. That's not happening, right? Just like it's undeniable that the price of Bitcoin is going up, even though for the past 5 years there have been no soft forks. I agree, I concede that. But I think that any Bitcoiner looking at reality will concede that it's not like everyone's getting Trezors and ledgers and whatever, writing down 24 passphrases or onboarding onto Lightning and everyone's using it. No, that's not the case. Totally not.
Switching gears a little bit. So you were there kind of for the formative days of Ethereum and kind of the launch of Ethereum. And I want to talk a little bit about that kind of age of kind of the 2015 to 17 era, because I do think that there was a lot of, how should I say this, optimism, and especially from Silicon Valley, this idea that was really kind of pushed that, Bitcoin would be outmoded by, sort of any kind of number of subsequent blockchains. And there's kind of a big explosion of, development, right? Everybody had their own kind of competing L1, and there was 1,000 different flavors with kind of 1,000, different logos. It seems like the idea back then was that, money, was moving towards the blockchain, that these monies would kind of compete on features, and that, we would have hundreds of thousands of different kind of programmable monies. It seems like that thesis has broken down, and there's a realization now from the people who were formerly in that camp that that world didn't really come to pass, and that Bitcoin, despite kind of not competing willfully, on the technology layer in the way that these kind of L1s did, again, still has kind of the commanding market share. Like, what do you make of that period? What was your involvement with Ethereum kind of early on? Like, how did you view it when you found it, and what do you make of the results of that period? Because I feel like it still kind of colors a lot of the conversation, right? A lot of Bitcoiners are wary of these kind of technological innovations because they come from this culture that for a time was very adversarial.
Look, Rizzo, I know, the first time I met Vitalik was when he was, a young reporter of Bitcoin Magazine. He came over to interview me at my university where I was a professor. We discussed the potential of ZK and a little bit about general computation and the halting problem and how could Bitcoin have a version that supports that, the notions of gas fees and stuff like that. I'll say something surprising. I don't come from the areas of like the sort of fiscal or economic approach to Bitcoin or Ethereum or these other things. Maybe the way I view all of them is that I don't look too much at the price. I do care a lot about the math and cryptography. That's my expertise. But the reason I admire these ecosystems is for the social, societal, and the benefits to humanity that they may deliver. And to me, it's undeniable that having the notion of smart contract and showing that you can do all sorts of interesting things with it is a huge contribution. That the one person and the one entity that really drove this and showed the world is Ethereum, led by Vitalik. And I think it's just earlier today, I tweeted something in support of Ethereum, and Luke Dash Jr., who I have a lot of respect for, came and said, "What I know that some Bitcoiners think that it's a huge mistake and it didn't do anything interesting and it's just one big scam." And I wrote back to him, look, I respectfully completely disagree. First of all, I have 100% conviction that Vitalik and others doing this thing really wanted to try to innovate and experiment with something that is important for humanity and for societies. And I think they did this with good intentions in their hearts. And I respect them for that. I have a lot of respect for a lot of people in the crypto industry. And, for instance, paper money, it took several centuries for it to be accepted. First of all, in China and later on in Europe, centuries. And, the notion, for instance, of public companies with shares also took decades, if not centuries, for people to tinker around from the 17th century or whatever in the Netherlands all the way to whatever regulated companies on multiple exchanges. And we're much closer to those very first experiments. So I have a lot of respect for people experimenting with these new social constructs. I think most of them are doing it with good intentions. They are not scammers. And I think that's how they view themselves. And that's how I would like, myself and others to be viewed as well. We're trying out this thing and trying to propel humanity, actually.
Well, I mean, maybe just you mentioned kind of like the benefits to humanity. I think one of the arguments that kind of comes as a counter to that is sort of that enforcing the 21 million limit is sort of one of those things that potentially has other benefits, right? Because how do you get away from the digital scarcity problem where you can just kind of create many of these networks and without kind of having an asset where, I don't know, I think maybe remember that Greg Maxwell kind of talked a lot about expanding the Bitcoin network effect, like, right, that you as a user within Bitcoin, this network effect, and sort of encouraging other developers to say, hey, I know the incentives for you to kind of build one of these layer one blockchains are really high. You get to participate in kind of the early access to some of these things. But, if you participate in Bitcoin, you'll be helping expand, other people's access to this money. And I know it's a thorny thing, and people have all sorts of opinions on it, but essentially it's this idea of what do you think now about these experiments? Because it does seem like the economic incentives of them, we've just seen that, and especially in Ethereum, I think of late, and maybe across the crypto sphere, right? It's that you have the incentive fragmentation, right? At least in Bitcoin, everybody owns Bitcoin, the asset. You don't sort of have to worry, even with these treasury companies, right? Maybe you're worried about what they'll do to custody. You don't have to worry about the fragmentation of incentives where, at the end of the day, if you are pitching some sort of Bitcoin backed stock, it's connected to Bitcoin in some way, right? Like there isn't that incentive fragmentation that you see kind of in the rest of the crypto space. So I'm just kind of wondering like how you think about that, because I agree with you, right? I watch Ethereum kind of come from its primordial stance, and one of the things I always say is like I feel like the Ethereum early culture, I really respect where they're coming from, because I felt like they wanted to achieve something, but then we have to kind of look in the past and and come to some sort of appreciation for what they achieved. And I do think this kind of incentive fragmentation does seem to be a bit of a problem, and that's where a lot of the criticism from Bitcoiners, I think, comes from. Is right that you have sort of this explosion of assets, and it's not quite clear like what the end result of this layer one competition of like what the net result of all this capital was. And a lot of people there are big winners and losers financially as a result of this. So
Yeah, but ask yourself. I go back to it's so I'm so sad that Satoshi isn't around, because I'm sure if he was around, he would introduce the opcodes and the minimal technological changes that would allow all of this innovation to happen on Bitcoin itself, which is, by the way, something that we're trying with our limited attempts, and others are trying with these things called Bitcoin L2s to unleash. But I'm saying, okay, let's suppose Ethereum never existed and someone came up and said, I have this idea. I don't even know if it's good or bad, but a smart contract. And I think, people wrote about it. Nick Schaber, yeah, and many others spoke about it earlier. Now, yeah, there's only Bitcoin, right? Whatever. No one ever creates any other coin. And you're saying, well, we would like, we would love to have, let's say, someone would like to test out whether a smart contract is a good idea or a bad idea on Bitcoin. Well, we both know, everyone knows, that's impossible. So now, or in our case, with Zcash, we said, with this privacy thing, it's really important, actually very important. The stable act is going to come in, financial institutions are going to come in, for clients and businesses, right? U.S. businesses are going to want to transact over crypto in some way. I want them to do that. I think it's great for the whole industry. I think it's better for humanity. They need privacy. The government forces that. Businesses want that. Okay, someone wants to offer something like Zcash. Okay, Bitcoin doesn't allow that. So, the question goes back. So now you can't experiment with that. You're supposed to, how are you, what is the proposal? So either you say like, there will never be any more innovation at all. It's not even, we know a priori that it is impossible to do anything better, be it smart contracts, be it, Starks, be it privacy, anything cannot be done better than whatever Satoshi wrote. And just, there should not be any more innovation at all. And you really have to be, I think if you really have to be sort of assigned to Satoshi some sort of prophet, religious kind of really, really, really strong thing to say, yes, we should never have any of that in any other place. And if you say, no, it's good that humanity experiments. We don't know if it's good or bad. And of course, it's important that people don't commit fraud and don't try, but experimentation is good. I like capitalism. I like the fact that people can experiment and other people can actually risk their money and see if this helps. Bitcoin does not allow that, right? Look, I would love to have StarkNet settle onto Bitcoin truly and expand Bitcoin. I wanted this in 2013. That's what I came and that was like, that changed my life. It's impossible. So what am I to do? Like sit and weep and pray for something to change? Or am I allowed to raise capital, form a company, try to deploy this technology wherever it can go, see if the world wants it or not, and try to advocate for Bitcoin to consider having something like Opcat that will allow it to deploy? I think not just about my own projects. I think that these things are good. And by extension, I think what Vitalik did is very important innovation and experimentation, even if the end result is that we look at it and we say, you know what, that wasn't needed. And I don't know good ways to do it without creating, new tokens or new mechanism. I just don't know. But if there's, if Bitcoiners can come and say, here's the way to do it properly with Bitcoin, I support that. And if it's a good way, the markets are actually going to say, like, Bitcoin has such a strong force that the markets are going to just decide and say, oh, here's the way to do it. Yeah, let's all do it. Just, I haven't yet.
How do you think about, because some of these, there have been advances in Bitcoin where it's just, there has been somebody finding out some breakthrough that wasn't previously understood, right? So BitVM would be the classic kind of recent example where, while Bitcoin does kind of have this, rigid set of rules, it is possible for someone kind of smart enough to have that next idea and kind of shift the paradigm of, we have these multi-sig kind of trusted setups. Now we have this one of M of N kind of setup, and that was an advance of someone who's just purely kind of from their own, ability to, see something that no one else did, right? They had a net new innovation that kind of unlocked some advance. I think even with like Arc and Arcade and things like that, right? So these were kind of net new innovations to Bitcoin, even ordinals, right? Without like kind of an additional economic incentive, right? They were just kind of net new. So I guess how do you look at that class of technologies and say that they're obviously a response to this cryptosphere, right? Because they were created in a way that sort of ignored the kind of tokenization incentives. So what do you think about that class of technological advances? Because they weren't really expected, right? Like no one thought that VM was really possible until it
First of all, I
happened.
think these technologies are really great, really great. I love them. I think I'm a big supporter of Lightning. I'm a big supporter of BitVM. We're collaborating. StarkWare is collaborating with Alpin Labs and also with Citria. We're going to also have a BitVM bridge onto StarkNet. I think it's amazing. It's great. I have no objection to that. Now, whether first of all, I love these things. I just want more. And the reason I want more is to allow people in the markets to decide what works best for them. So those who want to work with Lightning, I think it's amazing. It's great. And that's great. Folks that want to do other things, including, by the way, using multi-sig bridges and wrappers of BTC on Ethereum or other networks in order to do things like DeFi and generate yield on their Bitcoin. I think it's completely okay. I also think that people who want to look, by now there have been so many tokens out there generated, and the markets. So, like, as long as folks are not defrauding people and making false claims and lies, I think just like think about companies, right? The general notion of companies that raise capital. There are many companies. Many of them are public. There are even many more that are private. I think it's, again, undeniable reality that this is great for human society. Now, this took hundreds of years of innovation and tinkering with, and I'm sure that the initial experiments people looked at and said, "Whoa, this is like a scam," and what is this funny thing, a share or a stock in a company? But I think in hindsight, this was a brilliant set of innovations that propelled humanity. And I think a lot of these tokens are going to be like that. Yes, many of them are going to be worthless with time. That's fine. Many of the companies that are formed become worthless. The world understands that. That's fine. I think this experimentation is propelling humanity forward. And I would love as much of it to be done on Bitcoin. Now, I'll give an example. So StarkNet is what's called a layer 2, which means that there are basically two forms of finality. So I'm talking about the happy stage when, let's say, we have something like OpCat. Maybe it's driven because of it's needed because you worry about the post-quantum security of Bitcoin, and actually Starks give you that. So the world will be forced to do some upgrade to Bitcoin that will allow Starks to be there. Okay, so now we have this. You have the 10-minute finality block time of Bitcoin. And you have this layer 2 that allows people to do a lot of things like payments and so on. Now, yes, the higher grade of finality will come every 10 minutes, but people would like some sort of intermediate finality. And the way this finality will come, just like in the case of Bitcoin, it will come from a decentralized network of operators. Now, you have two options for how do you basically reach consensus, prevailing ones, assuming you want something decentralized, which is what StarkNet is. So one option is to say it will be based on proof of work and electricity and so on, and this is a possibility. But just like in the case of the layer 1, Bitcoin, people are now mining Bitcoin and using this electricity in order to get new Bitcoin. So the layer 2, will it generate that? Will it have a already from Bitcoin to generate new Bitcoin, new tokens? Sure. I mean, hell no, right? That cannot happen. So if you go with proof of work, you would want this finality to be able to generate some form of new token. What is that token? If it cannot be Bitcoin, it has to be something new. Same thing with proof of stake. If you want to go for a proof of stake thing, you would still need, it would force you into having some other token, or else saying this whole layer two, and there could be many of them, must be somehow dictated and dominated by the layer one, and the layer one may not even care about it, right? And then so how do you offer a finer grain of finality, let's say every 2 seconds, without actually putting on a new token? Now, I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm saying I haven't thought of a good way to do it. It's a little bit like the need for additional layer ones for something like Ethereum, or if you want people to experiment and offer more, right? Once you're out of, if you say there can be no more innovation at all in the area of cryptocurrency on anything, no smart contracts are doomed to fail from the start. Adding privacy is like no one should ever try. Like the best you can do is like only on Bitcoin. Okay. I mean, I disagree strongly, but okay. Once you say, well, there should be other ways to do stuff, in many of these cases, you will be forced to ask, what are the tokens, the assets that are going to be the ones that are used to operate, control, reward those who believe in those particular solutions? And I think the only reasonable answer to me, I mean, there are two answers. One is use Bitcoin, but then this opens up a huge set of questions itself. You know, what happens if Bitcoin goes up, goes down? Suddenly they have no control. Can they be outrun by, whales outside that don't even care about this? The whole coin infanticide things and things like that. Or you will use the C word, right? You will say the T word, right? There should be a token that controls and allows people to participate in these ecosystems, in these experiments.
Well, one of the funny things about this conversation, right, is that a lot of people who are the harshest critics of some of these systems, like, have also tried to produce their own kind of like token protocols and things like that, right? So I look like at Peter Todd and Giacomo Zucco, just as like a random example, right? Like they're kind of touted as these big kind of Bitcoin maximalists, like very hostile to kind of new innovation coming to Bitcoin. But they have their own token standard, right? That they're trying to put out in the market. Obviously, this would be RGB. Hasn't gotten the widespread adoption that maybe they would have wanted, or I don't know. I've tried to ask them. It's unclear if they even wanted to see it adopted. But they actually went through the process of making this, right? I think I talked to Alex B last week about Arcade. And this is sort of an idea to use Arc, which is kind of a tweak on Lightning to kind of add programming languages into this other kind of L2 construction. But maybe to back up a little bit, within Blockworks, I've had to kind of evangelize a little bit for the Bitcoin culture. And one of the things that I say is that, the Bitcoin maximalist view is generally that, we want to increase Bitcoin's utility as much as possible. And there's this view that a little bit that like other tokens are a bit of a failure, right? If we get to a point where we need another token, there's something that we messed up or could be aspirationally done better. And it just seems like that intent has served the culture fairly well, right? Because it's while it's created a lot of other technologies that maybe would have existed otherwise, right? It's like, what do you do if you get rid of that impulse, right? Because it does seem that impulse, there were a lot of different realities where Bitcoin looked very different, right? Maybe Gavin and Andreessen were successful with Bitcoin Classic and they upgraded 2 megabytes, and then Bitcoin has a very forward development culture, and maybe ran into some dead ends through that process. So I don't know. I guess, how do you think about the idea that the culture sort of has this kind of natural tension with the token ecosystem as being a potential benefit, even though we might acknowledge that maybe we'll never get, maybe it's aspirational, maybe it's totally aspirational, and some tokens have to exist.
I mean, you're a historian, right, of Bitcoin. I happen to love history. I'm an avid reader of like history. We are so early in this initial exploration phase of what Satoshi unleashed. I have no doubt that it will be adopted, but mostly it will be adopted in ways that we right now cannot foresee, which is great. Again, paper money took a few centuries to be adopted. Just the notion of paper money, not to mention ideas like fractional reserve banking. You can think it's good, it's bad, but I'm saying the exploration of humanity, right, on so many scales with these things it took centuries to reach where we are. And I think that exploration and experimentation are really, really necessary. And I've met so many Bitcoiners, Ethereum folks, the Solana folks. I know many of the founders of a lot of successful and less successful L1s. I talked to them. I didn't see too many scammers and bad people. I saw a lot of people who are entrepreneurs, visionaries, and folks that want to experiment and actually understand their limitations. And I think it's great. Now, maybe in 50 years, there's only Bitcoin, all the other whatever tokens and ecosystems go to zero. Maybe. I, I'll live happily knowing that that's the end state, or that that something else happened. I'll add to that let's acknowledge crypto and Bitcoin don't really yet have global product market fit across a lot of domains. Most people in the world, there's the Google test, right, for what is something successful. It's like the toothbrush test. It's something that everyone uses once or twice a day because it gives them value, like a toothbrush. So it's not that. Um, Most of humanity does not use Bitcoin in any form once or twice a day to derive value from it. And to me, that means we are not yet. I mean, there's certain areas of PMF for the broad class of technologies, like maybe stables, Bitcoin just as an asset for some people. Again, I argue that most pension funds and just random people don't actually have any exposure yet to Bitcoin. So even there, it's not clear global product market. It's not like the internet, or it's not even like AI for that matter, where like so many of us consume it daily, AI, right, in so many levels. And it's not like cars. It's not there yet. So we're very early. And I love, maybe it's the scientist in me, the mathematician. I just love and celebrate exploration and experimentation. It's great. Let's embrace that.
For the past decade, Ledger has been the global leader in digital asset security, trusted to secure more than 20% of the world's crypto assets. Celebrating 10 years of innovation, Ledger is making digital ownership more secure and accessible with their latest products, Ledger Stacks and Ledger Flex. These wallets feature the world's first secure touchscreens, simplifying your digital transactions while ensuring uncompromising security through Ledger's secure chip and proprietary OS. Plus, with the Ledger Security Key app, you can say goodbye to traditional passwords and step up your digital protection. Ready to protect your assets? Choose the most trusted name in hardware wallets, Ledger, and take control of your digital security today at ledger.com.
As always, investments in blockchain technology involve risk. Terms and conditions may apply. Do your own research. Well, I asked all this because the great consensus of Bitcoin, of all the people kind of running nodes. You've sort of asked the community, or you've come out in favor of a certain technical path, right? This is sort of opens up the whole can of worms of how Bitcoin's consensus operates or doesn't operate, depending on how you look at it. But we have this problem of like defining problems, right? Like, so one of the things I talked to a lot of the builders about have their own BIPs. Hunter Beast with his like quantum BIP, from Jameson Lopout today with a new one, right? You do have to get mind share within the community that there's some sort of problem, and then there has to be sort of a lack of controversy around the agreement that that thing solves real problems. So I don't know, what has been your recent interactions with the consensus process, and how does that compare to maybe 2013, 2014? Obviously it's still slow, but what have you noticed? I guess, what do you think is different about the process from what you've seen?
I think it used to move a bit more in a cohesive and coherent way. And I think then there was this like huge around the block size war, there was this huge collective trauma. Many people left, and like a lot of people felt, I think something changed there. I actually think that the question of how to govern Bitcoin or Ethereum for that matter, or any cryptocurrency, is like this one huge unresolved open problem that that I think still is looking for a solution. Like, okay, again, historical view. Human societies experimented with democracies, right, in a variety of ways in the modern era, right? Sometimes with bloodshed and very bloody things, French Revolution and so on. In other cases, like England, just this amazing, relatively 1,000-year slow process from starting with the Magna Carta and stuff like that, and ending in a very peaceful transition. Right, and of course, in early Greece, direct democracies and stuff like that. There's things that also still exist in areas in California and Switzerland and things like that. So. Governance is this, and it's okay. We're only 15 years into Bitcoin, but governance of decentralized global blockchains is this open unresolved problem, and I don't have anything very smart to say about it. Right? It's not like
because very messy. It's a very messy thing. Like once you open up,
it is. But at the very least, and I'm not claiming I want to or I have a very smart resolution for it. I will say this. I think that if it gets resolved one day, I think we can do better than the current state. I'm not offering to lead any changes. It's not for me. It's time will do whatever it is. But I think that if it is globally used and so on, it will be something that looks a lot more like good functioning democracies, like separation of powers. People who have a job and are delegated and given power for some limited time to make decisions. I think, as Churchill said, the democracy is like this very horrible and messy thing. It's just its only advantage is that it's better than any other system. So I think in 50 years, when Bitcoin is around, it will look a lot more like some, governments and international institutions.
I always say that this feels like the unresolved question in Bitcoin, which is that how do you have a non-government currency that doesn't end up sort of creating a government in order to manage it? And I think, we've watched the other cryptocurrencies kind of experiment with the different flavors of this. And Bitcoin has the most crypto anarchic, one where there's no process, people don't want to process. Yet there's this belief and hope that, given enough.
Wait, so I want to, okay, as a smart historian, right? Money is power, and financial and monetary policies are power, and there are powers right now out there, right? There are even superpowers. They understand, right, that suppose Bitcoin increases in its trajectory of becoming more and more important. Do you think that, for instance, the United States, China, Russia, let's suppose that Bitcoin somehow becomes way more central to the financial and economic policy of superpower, even more than it is today. Do you think that the leaders of these states and their economic advisors say, hey, we're chill with, let the core devs or, let them work it out? No, it is impossible. It is absolutely, if you have any sense of history and economics, that is completely unrealistic. It just cannot be. So either there's some fine balance of the superpowers in a world where Bitcoin is really used, and can dictate the success and failures of national economies. It is impossible to believe. It is completely ludicrous to believe that it will be the current state where, Kumbaya, I don't know what exactly it is. We'll wait and get the miners and the developers, and they're going to argue on their mailing list. No, impossible. Only two possibilities. Either it remains something very esoteric, and yes, it could be, or it goes even more mainstream, and then presidents, heads of national banks really care about it, and care means try to influence it in a variety of ways. I cannot see, as someone who reads and loves history, there is no other possibility. It cannot be that the whole world economy is on Bitcoin and we're waiting for 200 devs to sort of argue and decide on stuff.
I feel like that was sort of in some ways like the end result of the kind of fork war process, right? Is that there was this realization, especially with Craig Wright coming out and suing a lot of developers. That was another instance where it's like the development community was just able to be subject to legal attacks and different things. And then we watched the industry, businesses try to kind of move the Bitcoin development roadmap. That obviously wasn't super successful. We watched some of the miners come out and try to remove the roadmap. That wasn't super successful. So yeah, there is this kind of breakdown of the governance, and I think that there's also people who would argue that the current state is better than some form of governance that could be influenced, right? Because at the end of the day, what we're trying to protect here is this 21 million limit, right? Maybe at the end of the day, that's what it is, right?
Even if a current form of governance, whatever it is, and I actually don't exactly know what it is, but this whatever extends it's reaching among, I read the beautiful paper by Steve Lee and Ren with the 6 different groups. Let's suppose that this is both. I think it is an accurate description of the current state, but let's suppose that this is the ideal way that like these 6 groups stay, and like any consensus change must somehow involve them. Now let's again assume that governments, right, want to go on the Bitcoin standard and hold national reserves and so on. This is again, it is almost mathematically impossible to sort of square this with that. It will not stay the same, right? It will not stay the same. You will not have the 6, the media influencers and the miners and things will be nationalized. There will be national policies. This will be part of national economic policy. It's so, I mean, which is it? So if you want Bitcoin to never change with its governance, it sort of, I think, implies that you don't want it to be really adopted as like this really crucial thing in the global economy.
Do you think that like Bitcoin those groups will demand some sort of stakeholdership in whatever kind of financial software they're running?
Yeah, for instance, the United States will say, okay, because it's a national interest, first of all, we must always have twice the mining power of China, right? So the miners now, doesn't matter, and there will be laws governing, like, if there's a fork, like sort of it's national security, right? That's the miners. And, you go over a group, they say, oh, developers are important. Oh, you know what? There will be, DARPA or something, whatever. And it's, I don't know who. Oh, let's fund actually something that we can control because it's important for our national security. Like you look at AI, right? If AI is important to national security, then you're not just saying, oh, let's just let the companies, do whatever they want. No, you're going to have regulations, and should we control it? Again, it is impossible to square the sort of whatever the governance is right now of Bitcoin, with Bitcoin increasing more and more in its importance in the global economy. It's impossible to square those two things.
So I know you want to, your forward vision is more of compatibility between blockchains, right? It sounds like you see kind of Ethereum and Bitcoin as being the kind of maybe only decentralized, in your view, blockchains that can be built on. In that world, what's the synergy there? Like, what does one offer that the other doesn't, and why is that the best of compatible?
I don't know yet, and I think there are actually many serious attempts at decentralization, but like true decentralization, which to me like is the core and the most important thing of blockchains. Now, let me just say, I can see 2 end states for like where does blockchain or Bitcoin end. One is that it's this new financial rails for the existing system, which means banks, Robinhoods, whatever, they come and say, oh, it's our servers will be some version of a centralized, be it an EVM or a Lightning sort of network or a node, and we will route payments on it. But we will control, like we, the existing big players, will control everything about it. Okay, that's one end state. If I have a crystal ball and know that this is the end state, I'm leaving tomorrow. I don't care about that. Like, that doesn't interest me. And I think to me it would have been, I don't know. I don't want to be part of that. Okay. The other end state, which is certainly something that everything, in StarkWare and StarkNet is aligned with and working towards, even though it may be a bet and we may lose on this bet, says that true self-ownership, true ability to decentralize and not have central parties running stuff is the only thing that matters ultimately, even though right now we have so many, winners that are very centralized. And if that is the case, I think there will be many actually attempts at decentralizing in various forms. I agree that Bitcoin and Ethereum are 2 of them, but there are many others. And I think this is where, the decentralized networks, the very decentralized ones, the one that allow you and me and people even in a very private way to run portions of the blockchain, and then still have the integrity of the blockchain enforced on them, which is something that, again, that our technology actually delivers very well. I think that will be the end state, or that is the end state I'm leading, our little corner of the experiment towards, and that's the one that interests me.
Right. And I think that there's this idea now where, it seems like Bitcoin, the asset, and then stable coins are kind of, those are the big things that have mind share, right? To the extent that the crypto ecosystem has produced a lot of ideas, those feel like the ideas. But then there's also this idea that they can sort of be divorced from any infrastructure, right? So you can have a stablecoin on Bitcoin, you can have a Bitcoin wrapped asset on another another blockchain. So it gets tough for me to even think about, okay, like how does like the back end of this actually work? And that matters, right? Because you're asking people to essentially invest in the back end system, right? That's what a blockchain is, right? I have a computer that runs the blockchain, saves a copy of it, and then I have some sort of ownership and a stake in operating this. So I guess, like, what do you think about this back end like competition? How do you see it playing out, I guess?
So I envision that the end state is something I call the integrity web, which is a little bit just like the World Wide Web, is this like peer-to-peer protocol with so many things running on it. And it solves very well the problem of information, but it doesn't solve very well the problem of social constructs and things that have value, right?
I think we've talked a lot about in this conversation about, like, there's a bit of an amorphousness to these ideas in the Bitcoin and crypto space, right? They can exist in a lot of different forms, and mostly what we're arguing about, it seems, not like the actual form. Like, everybody acknowledges that so like most Bitcoiners will acknowledge the stablecoins have utility. They just would like to see them built on Bitcoin and kind of wrapped with Bitcoin, rather than the U.S. Treasury as they are today. And then maybe as a counter example to that, the Ethereum camps or the Solana camps might argue, oh, we can replicate and wrap Bitcoin like on our infrastructure, and so Bitcoin will move there. We don't have to deal with Bitcoin's blockchain. And so I don't know. It's like, how do you litigate? Like, I'm trying to get to the sense of, like, what does this thing look like that was built? Because again, I think, like, people don't actually disagree about the utility of the various abstractions. They just want it to be on their preferred database backend system, that operating system, right? This is the competition for the operating system of finance in some ways, no?
Yeah. So I don't know what the end state will be. I think there'll be, I like to think of this integrity web, which is like a layer on top of the World Wide Web that delivers integrity in payments, in social constructs, and things like governance mechanisms, in property rights, and this integrity is enforced by the principles of Satoshi, which are broadness, which means making sure that there are many operators, and you invite as many people to operate this integrity web. The second one is incentivized integrity, which means that you distribute value automatically via the protocol. Mining fees, all kinds of rewards, staking rewards, fees in the protocol are distributed to the operators to incentivize them to reach integrity, both perceived integrity, that people actually believe that my Bitcoin are safe because of the mining rewards and the electricity spent, or the staking rewards and whatnot, and also inherent integrity, that I wake up in the morning and my money is still there and it's really mine. It's not like it's not the JP Morgan's, or it's not like I don't need permission for the government. And the third one is like this beautiful full verifiability, right? That everything that is done, you can verify from first principles on commonly available means like your smartphone. And so I think I envision this sort of huge integrity web under these three principles of broadness, incentivized integrity, and transparency, or full verifiability. And what StarkNet is doing and has already done and shown the world is that you can use math and ZK proofs and cryptography to actually use a very small and computationally weak network, but one that carries immense value, to enforce integrity on a much larger web, even with no trust assumptions on the operators outside. That's our contribution, and we're going to apply it to Bitcoin as well after doing it to Ethereum, and I think this will be applied everywhere. You'll see a lot of like mini enclaves where local communities can do their own business and run their own social constructs and have their monies and stuff doing. It will be part, or enforced integrity will be enforced by the larger blockchains and networks. And this enforcement will come through math.
So with the ZK tech, what you're doing on the ZK side, you have a lot that's kind of in development or live today. Can you maybe speak to like what some of the things people are building on StarkWare are and why they sort of require, your solution as opposed to something else?
Well, we were the first out there to show that, I co-invented ZK Starks, which are post-quantum secure, have no trusted setup, have the best scale. I did this when I was still a mathematician and cryptographer and academic researcher. And we just really believed that this is, the rest of the world did not believe in this, but we really knew that this is the way to go. So we built a bunch of products that convinced everyone that this is the right technology. And now I'm very proud to say that all of the sort of ZK scaling solutions are using, my technology, which makes me very happy and proud. So what we're doing is, it's a little bit like, I think Archimedes said that, give me a place to stand and I will move the earth. So ZK Starks are saying, give me a weak blockchain that you trust, and I can put all of the world's financial transactions under its purview and integrity. Like, it can enforce Bitcoin if you allow OpCat, right? Without OpCat, I can't do that. But if you allow OpCat, you can have Bitcoin guarantee all financial transactions in the world, all of them are being done with integrity. It's with no other change to Bitcoin's scale or demands, just allow OpCat.
But aren't there second order effects of that, right? So we'd have to put some sort of hashes from these ZK constructs like into the blockchain, right? That data has to be in the data set. And isn't there some sort of relationship between the second layers and kind of the size of the computation coming on the ZK? I mean, this is a bit out of my realm with mathematical proofs, but my understanding is that the size of these, maybe the end result of the hash is not large, but there's some sort of more computational needs that you need in order to kind of
not from Bitcoin. So with Bitcoin, it goes like this: the proofs themselves are very lean and short, right? But the nice thing is, like with things like recursive proving, you can pack as much computation as you want into one of these proofs. So let's suppose that the proof is 500 kilobytes long. It's actually less than that. It's around 100 kilobytes. And most of it is, when you process such a proof, it's mostly processing hashes, not many of them, let's say 1,000 hashes. You're basically checking, Merkle trees. So it's something that Bitcoin miners are very comfortable doing. They do whatever, trillions and gazillions of them every second. Here, what you want is checking, let's say 1,000 hashes, right? That's one part. And the other part is adding and multiplying 32-bit numbers. Not many of them, let's say another 1,000 of those. So you have 1,000 of each. That's what it takes to verify a proof. This proof could assert the correct execution all the days worth of Visa's network, or 10 times that, or 100 times that.
Is there a trade-off for small miners though, right? Like people who are, we've seen kind of a resurgence in like home mining, maybe like people with like a BitX, for example. So I guess like, is it true that the kind of from big miners and the small miners can like both access that and verify that?
Yeah. Oh yeah, verifying a single proof is like 2 milliseconds on a smartphone. Yes, and will always be like less than, because again, verifying a proof, it means checking, let's say, 1,000 hashes, like that, basically, Merkle path in a tree, which just you check these chains of hashes, and there are like 1,000 of these hashes in one proof, and then you do multiplications and additions about, let's say, another 1,000 of them. And you just check that the two sides of an equation equals the equal. That's what you're doing. So these are things that you can run on your smartphone today, and they will take less than 1 millisecond. It's like every second of me talking to you is much more computation, like 1,000 times more than that. That's not an issue. Generating the proofs is a bit harder, but also not that hard. But where it could clog the blockchain is what's called the data availability. So now the question is, how much of the data, how much of information about what happened in Visa for the day do you want on Bitcoin itself? So I prefer not to have too much of it, but I would say that even there you could have users who want that information to be stored in blocks can pay for it. It will cost a lot because so probably when people buy a house, or maybe when governments do a huge deal, they will put that on a Bitcoin block. But for most of our daily transactions, we'll find other solutions, and that's fine. And they won't go into blocks.
So what is if you wanted to point to some to people out there to, hey, this is the state of the art of what we've achieved right now, what is some sort of app or some sort of application you recommend that they get directed to?
Yeah, so if you go and if you just Google Starknet and you, as a Bitcoiner, and you could see they're very good UX wallets that are nevertheless fully self-custodial, even without you needing to write down 24 words, and you can seamlessly pay using your biometrics into the Lightning Network and bridge from Bitcoin backwards to it. You can trade and buy runes and stuff like that. You can, of course, participate in DeFi. You can play games. Very soon, you can actually even generate yield on your Bitcoin in a variety of forms. You can borrow against it. We'll be unleashing a lot more and many more structured products, including staking your Bitcoin and participating in operating the Starknet network and generating yield on that around September, like in about 2 months. So stay tuned. But I think the most exciting aspect is that, if you're interested in innovative stuff that is a little bit different, Starknet is not doesn't use the Ethereum standard. It doesn't use Solidity and the Ethereum virtual machine. It comes with a ZK dedicated programming language that is very efficient and safe. If you want to see what the next generation of smart contract languages are that we hope someday to deploy fully on Bitcoin, that's where you can look.
Really interesting stuff. And then I guess for people who are on the development side, what would be your pitch about, are you recruiting developers, and what kind of things are you hoping they might bring?
A lot of applications for unleashing the value of Bitcoin. I think there's a lot of demand for doing the following things in a self-custodial way. Living your life on Bitcoin, borrowing, let's say, stables against it in a fully self-custodial way, generating yield, investing in a variety of things, maybe investing back in Bitcoin and leveraging up. That's also fine. I mean, risky, but fine. Some people want that. People then want to be able to very safely and with good UX, for instance, have private payments that also go directly onto Lightning, or in a variety of ways, transacting there. They want to live their life on Bitcoin. Today, all my day-to-day transactions are actually paid by a MasterCard looking thing that is fully backed by stables on Starknet, and it's going to be backed by Bitcoin very soon. It's something that gives you a very good UX. It allows you to interact with the daily world, allows you to live more. I mean, Bitcoin is like this immense value, but it is locked. It is very hard to utilize it in a self-custodial.
It looks like a Gemini card almost, but it's entirely virtual. This is just kind of a smart contract construct, like on the back.
Oh, there's also a physical card that you can, swipe and pay at stores, and there's going to be a sort of an Apple Pay version of it and things like that. But the point is that it's fully self-custodial, directly connected to Bitcoin. No third parties in between. You are the true owner of your stuff. Like Satoshi's, what Satoshi wanted Bitcoin to be for on a daily basis, right? For all of us to interact with.
Yeah, it's always tough. Satoshi's an inscrutable character, but for every one quote, you can find another, right? But sounds like fascinating stuff. Ellie, appreciate the time and for all the education. I guess any final thoughts you want to leave us with?
I'm a Bitcoin maxi in the sense that I really, really believe I want to maximize applying Bitcoin's principles to as much economic and social activity possible. For me, that is true Bitcoin maxi, which, by the way, also means, forming companies on it and, allowing things like stocks, and which are a version of tokens. So I'm supportive of all of that and a lot more, as long as it's truly decentralized. I'm not interested too much in the centralized or centralized leading interpretations or businesses on Bitcoin.
Well, revolution continues. Eli, thanks for joining us today. Once again, this has been a Supply Shock. You can catch us in London this October, Digital Asset Summit, bringing an institutional lens to the Bitcoin and crypto ecosystem overseas. You can head to blockworks.co there to learn more about tickets. Of course, we expect to see you there. Eli, thanks again for coming on the show. And this has been Supply Shock.
Thank you, Rizzo. Thank you.